Thanks, Eric. It's a good question, and I think a lot of people are perhaps surprised, and the most common question I get from my friends and supporters is, are you serious? And 21st Century Australia, we always had an agenda. We had a strong education agenda for the last 15 years. I've been an educator, as you know, and passionate about transforming Australia's education system, bringing it into the 21st century, and many of you are familiar with that. That's how we all originally met, for many of us. My plan always was, maybe in 10 years, I thought, you know, when I was 50, 55, I might enter politics. I thought you had to have grey hair before you enter politics. And one of my advisors said recently, Jamie said, go into politics at any age and you'll soon have grey hair. So I haven't worried about that. But 21st Century Australia is really about two major things. One, as I said, about the education system, bringing it into the 21st century, but also I believe our political system in this country is heavily outdated. It was created in the 19th century. It's 200 years old, and it's simply not working. It's not working, and that's evidenced by the fact that they have to have compulsory voting in a free and democratic society to get people to show up at the polls and vote. That's a mission of failure of the system. If we had a modern-day 21st century political system where people had the choice to vote direct on major policy, I believe, you know, a lot of people say, Eric, that Australians are apathetic and don't care about politics. I don't believe that to be true. I've been out speaking to many people. I was in New England electorate last week on the streets talking to voters. Deep down, I feel Australians are actually passionate about the future direction of our country. They're just like many of us have been disillusioned with the political circus that we see in Canberra. And they do want to have a say, and I think if Australians were given the choice to vote direct on major policy, which is one of our biggest initiatives for 21st Century Australia Party, is that you would see a groundswell of support of Australians being committed to that. So that's a big part of what we're about. We're about transforming the political systems, because I don't think just to become an elected politician or just to have a minority party that may one day become a majority party, even that is not enough to change to get the results we want. We have to change the system. So I guess in saying what is 21st Century Australia about, it's more about a movement than it is about a political party. It's a movement to change this country and put the power back in the hands of voters. What a true democracy should be is that the power should be in the hands of voters, not in the hands of inept politicians and controlled by minority interests like this current government is. You know, there's many things. I think you see many political parties start. There's others in the news at the moment, and I think the challenge is many political parties run on single issues, and when that issue comes and goes, so does the party. We, you know, have released a detailed 25-point policy document, which was released only last week to the media and to our supporters, and that's available at our website. Many of you have a summary of that in your hands tonight. So ultimately, we're talking about how do you, if you have a prosperous and abundant country. Australia is a very rich country, and I'm sure we're all grateful for the great country we grow up in. But you've got to understand that, you know, I grew up on a farm in northern New South Wales, and I've seen the work, you know, that my parents have done. I've seen the work that my grandparents and my great-grandparents have done, the generations and generations of hard work that they've gone and put into this country to enable Generation X, and in my case, and Generation Y, and to have a great life. I mean, I've been blessed to grow up in this country and live a great life, thanks to my parents, thanks to my grandparents and previous generations. And I feel sometimes Australia has lost its way. It's a little bit like we've become like a trust fund baby, where we've inherited massive riches, but we're squandering it. And we've just gone through one of the largest commodity booms in the history of not only this nation, but the history of this planet. And we have nothing left to show for it. We have a government that's run up $250 billion in debt. That's running up at $3 billion a week. We are heading down a path that I believe is not too much dissimilar to that of Greece and Italy and Spain. If we continue on this path, and I know I'm speaking to the converted because the majority of Australians, 71% of them at this point in time, agree with that we need to change course. So I think a big part of what we're about is fiscal responsibility, you know, being financially managing the money that we have, looking after us as taxpayers' revenue, so that we can run surpluses, so we can invest into our future, and we can have a more abundant, prosperous country. And Australia has no idea how prosperous we can be as a nation if we had the right economic management. And to do that, you have to put people into politics that actually have some real life results. If you look at the current statistics of our current politicians, out of 226 MPs in this country, only 33 of them have any entrepreneurial, executive or board level management experience. The large majority of them in this current government, they are union officials. The coalition is predominantly lawyers. We have very few people that produce results in real life. We have career politicians, and I feel that Australian voters are sick and tired of career politicians. We want to see people that can produce results in the real world, get into politics so they can also produce results in our political system. Remember, I'm running in the seat of New England. Those who don't know the seat of New England, it's northern New South Wales and towns of Tamworth and Armidale and Glennon, that's where I grew up, and the towns around there. So it's a fairly conservative electorate. But in talking to the media and journalists in the last 3 weeks since we announced, it has come up a lot. My position, and I guess we're obviously a new party, so it's up to the members to decide on the position of the party, but we are pushing very clearly in this country that voters will get to vote direct on major policy in this country, and it's not left to the hands of politicians. So if Australian voters believe that this is a major policy, then Australian voters should get to say whether they're for it or against, and that's a true democracy. It should not be decided by the politicians. So our view is very strongly that we need to change the system, and there's software available from the US right now that we intend implementing in this country that enables you to vote online, that protects against fraudulent voting. And even before we have to change the Constitution to enable direct voting on major policy, we're going to let voters start voting direct on major policy and use that to pressure the politicians to vote in accordance with what the majority wants, because that is a democracy. Yeah, for those who don't know, I'm sure most Australian voters know Tony Windsor. He's the very person who's responsible for this inept current government that we have. In case you don't know who he is. Why am I running the seat of New England? Obviously, it's where I spent most of my life. It's where I was raised. It's where my family is. It's where I have, farms. I've invested heavily into the region. And out of all the electorates in the lower, there's 150 lower house seats in this country. Out of all the electorates that I'd run for, it's the one that I feel connected to most passionately. And I think it's important not to forget where you come from in life and to go back. And I've had a tremendous life and tremendous success and achieved many of my dreams, but thanks to the great upbringing I had and going to school in New England, playing rugby league in that area. So I have a strong connection to that electorate. So it's an electorate I want to run in because I believe in it. And I believe in the future of the rural industries in regional Australia as well, because I'm directly involved in that. Also, to be honest, that in 2010 I was overseas at the last election and the results come through and it was a hung parliament, despite the coalition getting 646,000 more votes. It was a hung parliament. And I couldn't believe when Tony Windsor, he wasn't the only one, Rob Oakeshott, but particularly Tony Windsor, decided to side and put Julia Gillard's government into power. You've got to understand that he'd just been re-elected in New England, and 92% of those voters did not vote for Labor. Only 8% voted for Labor. And I don't understand how any independent MP can get confused about that. The very voters who just voted you in, who should I put into power? And he betrayed his electorate. And I am a New England voter, and I and many others felt betrayed. And I said, at that time, I'll fund a campaign. I wasn't intending to run in at that time to see that he is booted out of Tamworth because he betrayed his electorate. He will still defend that decision to this day, that he did it for the right reasons. I believe he did it for the reasons because he didn't like the Nationals, he doesn't like Barnaby Joyce, and he can't stand Tony Abbott. So he did it for his own personal reasons. So New England voters are not very impressed, understandably, with Tony Windsor, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to run, but also because we're not running as independents. We are running a party that's we want to be a legitimate third-party force in this country, and we intend running candidates in the majority of the lower house seats and all Senate seats in each state around this country, because we have followers, as you know, Eric, Australia-wide. We want Australians come September. We don't want them to have to be saying, look, I don't really want to vote for Gillard, I'm not that overly inspired with Tony Abbott. Most Australians are talking around the barbecue going, who am I going to vote for? There's no choice. And they feel disillusioned. We want to make sure every Australian come September has a legitimate choice as a party to vote for. And the feedback we're getting so far is that that's resonating with a lot of people. So that's one of the reasons I'm running. I believe, yes, can we win the seat of New England? In the streets of Glen Innes, Armidale and Tamworth this week, I had many people coming up to me that I've never previously met. They all know already in that region. It's been in the press a lot in the last 3 weeks since we announced that I'm running. And already a large amount of people intend voting. Armidale Express, one of the major newspapers in the area, run an online poll. Some of you will be familiar with it. And we're winning in those polls as well. Some of the journalists might say that's because we have a lot of online supporters. Or my comment was, well, why don't Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce have a lot of online supporters? Everyone's welcome to vote online. So I think it's come down to the situation now. Tony Windsor will not win the seat of New England unless he gets preferences. And I'm continually asked, who will I preference in the seat of New England? And I said, look, that's open to discussion, but I can tell you now, we'll not preference Tony Windsor, we'll not preference the Labor Party in the seat of New England, which pretty much means Tony Windsor will not be re-elected in that seat. I think it's important, and speaking to a lot of people. I had people last week when we were doing events in New England, all ages coming up. I remember one dear lady, probably 80 years of age, in the front row, and saying, how do we change the system so they can't boot out a Prime Minister like they did with Kevin Rudd? She said, because if we get you to be Prime Minister, we don't want you booted out, which I thought was a very considered remark. But I've had people coming up to me and saying, you know what, Jamie, I haven't been involved in politics, I've been disillusioned, but now I'm so excited about politics again and I can't wait to vote. And I think a lot of the young people in Australia are like that, and we intend reaching them because, the major parties are certainly old school. They don't really understand how to reach people, but also, if you have manufactured comments, you look at a lot of the political leaders, I call them manufactured. They only say what their political advisors will tell them, or their speechwriters will write. They're after that 2-minute or 30-second grab on TV. It's manufactured. They don't speak the truth. They don't speak with passion, and they don't say it how it is. And Australians, I believe, want to hear the truth and want to no BS and tell it how it is. And especially young Australians, that's what they relate to. So we intend reaching them by speaking the truth, being passionate, and having common sense, strategic, intelligent policies. I had the fortune to meet Gina Rinehart, a couple of weeks ago, and I know she's not the most popular woman in this country, but she said, she's very passionate Australian. I got to give it to her. And she's quite a nice lady, but she said, Jamie, the challenge in this country is that common sense seems so uncommon. And I said, I've been saying that for 15 years in my seminar. We should perhaps call common sense uncommon sense. Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you haven't read the book Total Recall, I've studied hundreds of personal development books, and his autobiography, Total Recall, is probably the best book I've read in the last 10 years of what it takes to outperform. Whether people look up to Arnold or not, there's no one else I know on this planet that's succeeded in, as an athlete, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as a Hollywood star, and as a politician. You can't do that through luck. You have to have more going for you than that. So I did learn a lot about, because obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger's political mentors, remember, were the Kennedy family. And I don't think you could have a better political mentors than the Kennedy family, who, probably the most powerful political family in the United States of America. But I did mention to Arnie when I was over there a couple of weeks ago that I will be running, and his advice was pretty simple. He said, the challenge is that most politicians, as I was talking about before, they're manufactured and they don't speak with passion. He said, all you have to do is speak with passion, believe in what you're saying, and connect with people. It's pretty common sense advice. So that's the advice that he gave me, and he was extraordinarily successful at getting elected very quickly in the state of California. Well, it is topical at the moment, and I would say, I mean, I'm encouraging entrepreneurs to go into politics. In Australia, we don't have enough of that. So from that angle, that is great. The only challenge, I think, what a lot of people see with Clive is Clive likes to be in the media a lot, and he's not always taken seriously because he's not always being serious. If Clive is actually serious about running in the seat of Fairfax right up to election, if he was elected, would he go into Parliament? Then I have no issue. But, like many people, is he serious is the question. If he's not serious, he's just making a mockery of start-up political parties in this country. He's not going to help the agenda. If he is serious, good luck to him, and he should share his views passionately, and that can contribute to Australia. But he has to be serious, otherwise, I mean, voters don't like to be taken as fools.